Doing your job may be hazardous to your career. I have to warn you this. This is a very serious problem. In fact, this is why I left MIT. I researched this problem for 10 years. I couldn't find an answer. And I even couldn't prove that there's no answer. I mean, it's a horrible problem. There's no solution. And here's the key problem. For those of you who are engineers, you'll understand the unfortunate non-linearity of the world. You know, it would be so much easier if the world was linear. But in a non-linear system, in order to optimize the system, you have to sub-optimize the subsystems. That's a mathematical truth. This is not, well, in some companies, yes. This is just the way it is, unfortunately. In order to optimize the system, you have to subordinate the subsystems. Well, so far so good. What's the problem? You just do it. Well, the problem is that in every company, people get measured and compensated by the performance of their subsystems. So let's just say, let me go back to soccer. Let me get for. So how do you win in soccer? Not scoring goals. This is why the U.S. is so, we Argentinians know something you don't. I mean, you may have 500 times our GDP, but we know soccer better. How do you win? You have to score more goals than the opponent. You have to do both. I mean, you can score 100 goals. If your opponent scores 101, you lose. So now, let's just say I'm a management by objectives kind of guy. Okay, I studied Harvard, that horrible place on the other side of the river. The people that don't get into MIT end up going to Harvard, and the business school at worst. So I'm coming here. Hey, I'm the big coach. I'm going to organize this soccer team. We want to pay for performance. We don't want people slacking off. We're going to do management by objectives. If you're a defender, your job is to defend. So I'm going to pay you in inverse proportion to the number of goals you allow. I mean, that seems reasonable. No, the more goals that people score against you, the worse your performance. And if you're an attacker, if you're in the offense, I'll pay you according to how many goals you score. Pretty simple problem, you'd say. I mean, this is the simplest organization, 2 subsystems, the simplest optimizing problem you can ever have. Now, what do you prefer if you're a defender? You prefer to win 5-4, or do you prefer to win 0-1? Where are you going to get the biggest bonus? To lose 0-1, sorry. This is not a trick question. What's the highest bonus? 0-1. I mean, this is shocking. The simplest problem, 2 subsystems, linear everywhere, the simplest incentive system, and I already have half of the team preferring to lose. No, this is very serious. Multiply this by 1 million and you have a company. But this is what happens. I mean, have you ever had a problem in LinkedIn where you say, well, but these guys are not really, I mean, they're not thinking with the company's hat. I mean, they're putting their functional hat and they're trying to get the best for themselves. Of course, you would never do that. I know it's not you, never the people in this room, but all those people who didn't come to the talk, they always do this thing. That's why they didn't come, because they don't care. Now, the same thing would happen with the offense. You'd rather lose 4-5 than win 1-0. Why? Because you're being paid on how you score, not what happens to the team. Now, I don't know if LinkedIn has pay for performance, but I imagine every company does. So commission, for example, if you have sales commission, this is the same. You ask the operations, like Henry Ford would say, they can have any color as long as it's black. Why? Because black is cheap, so we can have everything black. And you ask the salespeople and say, let's have a rainbow, because people like cars with 7 different colors, one after the other. But it's outrageous. It costs 5 times more than we can charge. Well, I don't care how much it costs. I get paid by revenue. I don't get paid by profit. This is exactly the same thing. Now, every organization in the world has this problem. It's the most intractable and the most difficult problem. And what I want to tell you is that this problem is also what brought down the wall in Germany. The communist economies have this problem in droves, and they're unsustainable because of that. So it's not just a business problem. This is a really profound economics problem about the management of incentives. And I'll connect this with that, and I'll share with you some wise words of a Nobel laureate. But here's the problem in a more abstract manner. If you provide global incentives, what you're doing is you're creating one team. And everybody, there's no company in the world that I've ever worked. I've worked all over the world, Indonesia, Australia, England, Germany, the US, of course, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. Every company in the world, every company has ever, I ever walk in, the first thing I say, we need to improve cooperation. We have silos. We just, we need to work better together. Now, why do they have silos? Well, it would be better to pay just the team wins and loses together. Just give them global incentives. The team wins, everybody gets a bonus. The team doesn't win, nobody gets a bonus. Don't separate them in sub-teams. What's the problem with that? Well, it turns out there's a lot of problems with that. The first, of course, what's the good part of that? You get alignment, you get cooperation, because everybody's pursuing the same goal, and you get risk pooling. This is a little more technical, but because everybody works together, if you have random shocks, people like insurance, okay? So instead of having, you have a good outcome or a bad outcome, you can average across the board, and everybody likes that. This is a part of human nature based on, well, it's based on something that's called decreasing marginal utility. But believe me, this is the case. It's another logical fact about how human beings are. We prefer certain outcomes to risky outcomes when it's big enough. But what are the problems? The first is it's very hard to evaluate what's going on because it's very complex. When you partition a system, well, it's much easier to manage it. But then more important than that, you get moral hazard. This system is vulnerable to predators. So if somebody walks in and says, hey, imagine everybody gets 1/4,000th of the profits, the bonus pool of LinkedIn, and everybody gets that. Or, let's just say that. What's the best case scenario? Well, let's just say you have one of these free riders. It's like, well, 3,999 people work really, really hard, and just one person goes fishing. That's not going to make much difference on the bonus pool. So I get to go fishing, and I get the bonus. What's the problem of that logic? It's never just one person. If other people start seeing me go fishing, then why am I working my ass off if this person is fishing? I'm going to go too. And then you end up like the Soviet Union, where they had this deal. They pretend like they pay us, and we pretend like we work. It's a good deal. But then there's something worse. Let's just say you are a bottom feeder. You're a bad performer. Well, you want to go a place where the average will lift you. So you're going to attract the worst people, because the worst people would like a payment system where everybody gets average, because they know they're below. They're at the bottom tail of the distribution. And if you are a great performer, do you want to be averaged? No, because you know your average is going to bring you down. So if you're above average, you don't want to work in a place like that. If you're below average, that's exactly the wrong incentive. You don't want to attract the worst people and expel the good ones. So everybody says, yeah, we should all be together. But the moment you put a global incentive system, you screw up the company, because you create incentives for predation, and you attract the wrong people and expel the right people. So it's not that easy. Now, I'm sorry. So now you have, well, let's do local incentives. But of course, you get excellence. People are focused, you have accountability, and you attract the right people. You're going to keep your tips. So if you're a waiter, you want to work in a place where if you're a good waiter and you get big tips, you don't want to average your tips. You want to keep them. But what's the problem? First is, I don't give a damn about any other table, because my tables are my tips. So if those guys are starving to death and the waiter is not taking care of them, that's too bad for them. They sat at the wrong table. Next time, sit at my table. If you're an extraordinary salesperson, why would you ever train another salesperson? They're your competitor. It's like you're happy when they fail. That's sub-optimization. And also, everybody has to bear the risk. So this is the silos. Every company has silos. Why does every company have silos? Because they have local incentive systems. Why do they have local incentive systems? Because if you have global incentive systems, it's worse. So this is kind of like bad news, worse news. What the hell do you do? Really, this is an extraordinarily difficult problem. And just to quote Friedrich Hayek, one of my heroes, a Nobel laureate, the economic problem of an organization is rapid adaptation to changes in its particular circumstances. Then, the ultimate decisions must be left to the people who are familiar with these circumstances, who know directly of the relevant changes and of the resources available to meet them. This problem cannot be solved by first communicating all this knowledge to a central board, which then issues its orders. Hayek is participating in something that was called the calculation debate. It went in economics between the Austrian school. Hayek was an Austrian. Ludwig von Mises was another Austrian. Ava Lerner, which actually was given the Nobel Prize with Hayek, and Oskar Lange were the communists. And the communists said, it's possible to calculate how to run an economy with a central board. And this is how they did it in the Soviet Union. Hayek and Mises says, no, if you don't have markets, the economy will collapse. In 1920, Mises predicted that the Soviet or any communist economy would collapse because without capital markets, there was no way to allocate resources rationally. So this is a debate that took 80 years. I mean, essentially with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Chinese embracing some sort of capitalism. It's their own breed. It's kind of a centrally controlled capitalism, but it's still far away from what Mao wanted. That debate is finished. I mean, you can see North Korea, Cuba, there are a few countries in the world, but very few countries that still embrace the communist principle that you can run a central economy. Well, the same thing happens in a company. You cannot run a central company. That's what he's saying. So this would say decentralize, allow people to do what they do best, and so on and so forth. Now, there's only one problem, and as he says, but the man on the spot cannot decide solely on the basis of his limited but intimate knowledge of his immediate surroundings. There still remains the problem of communicating to him such further information as he needs to fit his decisions into the whole pattern of changes of the larger organizational system. So this says, don't decentralize. I mean, imagine if you're a war, and you tell, okay, every soldier knows exactly what's happening in his surrounding area. So the soldier can decide, what do I do now? But then if you have 10,000 soldiers, each one of them going in their own direction, and say, oh no, I can't go forward because there's a lot of enemies forward, so I much rather go sideways, but the other people are coming the other. It's a mess. You need a strategy for everybody together. You cannot allow people to emerge with a strategy. It doesn't happen. This is an incredibly difficult problem. I'm going to say this is an impossible problem. So this is the depressing news. So now comes the good news. Two hikers are in the woods, and then they find the bear. Blah! The bear is just coming towards them. They're shocked, and one of them sits down, gets his running shoes, and starts untying his boots. And the other says, what the hell are you doing? So I'm going to run. You can't outrun the bear. I don't have to. I only have to outrun you. This is the good news. You don't have to outrun the problem. You cannot solve this problem. You only have to do it better than your competitors. Everybody has this problem. Everybody is ruined by this problem. If you only suck at it a little less than everybody else, you'll be the best in the world. I mean, I'm serious. People suck at this to no end. Companies are horrible. I told you, every company I know is struggling with this issue. Why is this so? Because people don't know what their job is. People think their job is to attack. People think their job is to defend. That's not your job. Your job is to help the company win and create economic opportunity for everybody. But that's really hard because all the systems are going to delude you. This is like a matrix. Every time you look at an incentive system, every time you look at a performance measurement system, it's going to delude you into thinking your job is to get the metric. The metric is, there's a reason for it, and I could explain more, but I just wanted to give you the flavor.